Warning: the Mega Man X channel and all of its videos are not meant for viewers under the age of 13. Parental guidance is advised. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to my review of The Last of Us 2. I want to start off this video by saying that I was a huge fan of the first game, and I really hold the characters of Ellie and Joel near and dear to my heart. Everything that they had to go through, it was just amazing and very sad at the same time. So now we'll jump into what I think about The Last of Us Part 2. We'll start off with the good things. This is not a bad game. Overall, I'm probably going to give it a 7 out of 10, and that's being generous, to tell you the truth. I disagree with a lot of people that are giving it 10 out of 10. I think that's far from being a 10 out of 10, this game. So yeah, the visuals were great. They're probably the best that we've seen to date in any video game. Like, I was always captivated by seeing all of the expressions on all of the characters' faces, whether they'd be going through pain, anger, all of that. You could really see all of that expression on the faces of the characters, and that was really impressive. The gameplay wasn't all that popular among the gaming community, but I really didn't mind it. They did improve on a lot of things from the first game, like little bits of how the upgrading system works when you're upgrading your weapons or when you're upgrading yourself. But all in all, I didn't think the gameplay was bad at all. So that's how I felt about that. And also, the soundtrack of the game was also really, really good. Once again, just like the first one, they did an amazing job with the soundtrack. I loved every minute of it. Another thing I thought was pretty cool was the fact that at some points in the game, you can sit down and play the guitar as Abby, and you can pretty much create whatever song that you want by playing a tune on the guitar. And I've seen a lot of YouTube videos where people are creating popular songs by playing the guitar with Ellie, and I gotta say, it's pretty cool. The acting was amazing. When I was talking about the expressions on the characters' faces, that was great. The voice acting as well. Every actor, including Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, who plays Ellie, and Troy, who plays Joel, they did an outstanding job. Amazing. They hit the mark really well, I gotta say. Okay, so here's where we get into the controversial stuff. The story. So, if you guys have not played this game, there will be spoilers that we're going to be talking about. So if you haven't played it or if you haven't finished it, I suggest you turn off the video. Alright, so the story isn't garbage. There are some points which I really enjoyed, such as, for example, the birthday scene with Ellie when she was still a kid, when they go to the zoo. That really had an impact on me. That really took me back to the first game and all the things that I really missed about it. And, it was a happier time in Ellie's life because you can tell in the way she acts. She's a lot more chipper, a lot more happy. But the game was just missing elements It was lacking in things that made the first game special. For example, the bond that we everybody saw between Joel and Ellie, that was gone, nowhere to be found ever again. Not with Ellie and Joel, not with anyone. Because at this point of the game, Ellie resents Joel because of keeping it a secret. Why Joel broke Ellie out of the hospital when they were about to operate on her for the cure. So that bond was shattered. And I think that's one of the key points that was missing in the game. We see a glimpse of it uh, in the flashback birthday scene when Joel took Ellie to the zoo. And that's why it was one of my favorite scenes in the whole game. Because when you see her in the present time, when she's traveling through Seattle with Dina, she's a lot more gloomier, depressed, which is understandable. You know, she just lost Joel and she's dealing with a lot of grief. So she's not as quippy with her remarks and all of that, which is really sad to see. She's basically a completely different person now. And not just her. A lot of people have changed because this takes place 4 years after the first game. So I do understand, people going through changes because you really are gonna change. 4 years is a long time, and you know Ellie and Joel, they moved to Jackson, so they're not in the danger zone anymore. Basically, with all the clickers that they have to deal with, the hunters, people trying to prey on them, and that really toughened them up. Like they could take care of themselves, and they had their guard up at all times. And this brings me to a point that a lot of people had a problem with in the game, which brings me to the next subject that I want to discuss. This was a subject that was it caused a lot of contention with the fans of the franchise, basically dividing them. Um, it had to do a lot with the Joel's death, basically. Now, before I begin talking about this, I want to tell you guys that before the game came out, everybody knows about the leaks that happened before the game came out, and I wanted to see what all the fuss was about.
Get rid of that. Hold your horses. I want to see what all the fuss is about.
So, a lot of people they didn't want to have anything to do with the leaks. They didn't want to be spoiled. But the reason that I wanted to see them, I wanted to be spoiled, was because I saw a lot of people's reactions, and a lot of people were being outraged. And I was curious to know why. Like, why were so many people being outraged? So I looked them up. I looked up the leaks, and I wanted to know the story. And the leaks were basically almost 100% true, except for the fact that Abby was not a transsexual, like the leaks were saying. But everything else besides that was pretty much accurate. Um, so after hearing and reading about the leaks, I decided to give the game the benefit of the doubt. Because I said, these leaks, they might be all false. And they're probably just trying to sham the game and trying to get people not to play it. And maybe they have a grudge against Naughty Dog. I don't know, whatever. So I gave the game the benefit of the doubt. But like I said, the leaks were pretty much almost 100% accurate, except for that little fact that I mentioned earlier. So, I hate to say this, but I kind of regretted playing the game. Like, for real. Anyway, let's get into the first topic, which is Joel's death. When Joel and Tommy meet up with Abby's group in the beginning of the game, in the house where Abby's group is staying, they both drop their guard and basically tell them who they are and where they're coming from. And little did they know that Abby's group is looking for Joel to kill him. You know, they didn't know that. So there's a lot of people saying that Joel would have never have done that. He would have been wary, and it's just not something in his character that he would do. Neil Druckmann, in a podcast on YouTube, he was interviewed along with Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, who play Ellie and Joel in the game. And Neil Druckmann points that out as well. He says that they've been living in Jackson for 4 years, and it's a safe community. Most of everybody there are good people, and they don't have to worry about the outside world that much. So, and plus, they're always constantly getting people from the outside, inviting them into their community, and they basically just live happy lives about as much as they can in the post-apocalyptic world. So it's a completely different world when you're living on the outside, where there's nothing but clickers around and infected people and psychopaths and hunters. And you when you're living in a place like that, you constantly have to have your guard up, and you just can't afford to let it down because you know, it just takes one instant and you're dead. But when you're living in a community that's relatively safe for 4 years, that can change someone. You could get softer, you can rely more on people, and that's exactly what happened with Joel. So I can see him letting his guard down with Abby's group. He thinks that these people are just passing through, because they actually did tell him that. They said, we're just passing through, and he invites them to the Jackson community, say, hey, you can stock up on supplies and then you can be on your way. So he legitimately thinks that these are good people. So it wasn't a surprise to me that he let his guard down. Neil Druckmann, he made a very valid point when he brought that up. But unfortunately, that led to Joel's death. I understand that Joel made a lot of enemies with all of the actions that he did throughout his life after the outbreak happened. So, yeah, I understand that he probably had it coming because of all the enemies that he made. And sooner or later, it was going to catch up to him. But don't kill him within the first 2 hours of the game.
Interesting too, I see a lot of people talking about respecting the character. Also, it's like they're trying to say somehow this says Joel is a villain or a hero, and I see people arguing like based on how he lived his life, does he deserve this kind of death? And it's like, it doesn't matter. The point is, in this world, it's like whether you're a hero or a villain, it doesn't matter. That doesn't.
So this brings me to the bad points of the game, and I'm sorry to say, but there are a lot of bad points on this game. And I'm sorry again to say that it does have a lot to do with the story. And this is the point where I disagree with Neil Druckmann. He also stated that he was getting angry with everybody because they don't understand how much him and Troy Baker love the character of Joel. He says, nobody loves Joel more than I do, except for Troy Baker. First of all, if you love Joel so much, why don't we get to play as him? We really didn't get to play as him that much. I know you get to play as him in the intro, but we needed more, honestly. But we don't get that because they kill him off so quickly in the first 2 hours of the game. And I know it's Ellie's story and all, but come on, guys. I mean, this is the last time we're gonna see Joel. So by barely playing anything at all as Joel, that basically takes away any connection we have or had, and that basically takes away any chance we have to bond with our most beloved character. So there wasn't enough time spent with him. And I don't just mean through flashbacks because they do that a lot in this game. They show a lot of flashbacks, and that's mostly where we see Joel. It's just flashbacks. That's what I think, honestly. And supposedly he's a beloved character by Neil Druckmann. And I think, honestly, playing as Joel for one last time, that would have brought us some kind of closure, some kind of last connection with this most beloved character. So if you have to kill off one of the main characters, you need to take more tender care of them. And the way he was killed bothered me a lot too. Because if you play the game, and I'm sure all of you have who are watching this, he is killed in a very, very brutal way. And I know they're trying to make it as close to real life as possible. And going back to the other thing that I was talking about, Neil Druckmann's other comment when he said it doesn't matter how Joe is killed because we're dealing with the real world. First of all, this isn't the real world. This story that we're seeing, because there's no way that we're going to see a virus like this, like that transforms human beings into fungal-like monsters. One way that I thought of that would have been better with Joel's death is that if Joel was with Ellie at the time of his death, if Abby's group were chasing Joel and Joel managed to escape, like there was some kind of hostage situation, Joel managed to escape, but Ellie didn't. They were holding her captive. And Abby begins to say, Joel didn't escape. He was in like a building or somewhere hiding close by. And Abby and her group knows this. And Abby tells Joel if he doesn't come out and give himself up, that Abby's group or Abby herself was going to kill Ellie. And that Joel would do anything for Ellie. So, of course, he's going to go out there and sacrifice his life to save Ellie. So they do a trade-off, and they let Ellie go, or they pin her to the ground like they did in the actual game, and then proceed to kill Joel. See, that would have made more sense because he actually sacrificed himself to save Ellie, and that would have given his death more meaning. Or you don't even have to do it that way, the way that I described. Anything would have been better than what we actually got in the game. And I understand the viewpoints of people that hate Joel, because not everyone in the gaming community loves Joel, like I do, basically. There's literally people out there that are saying that he's a piece of crap because of what he did. By saving Ellie, he basically damned the whole world of any chance they have of finding a cure. But you have to understand it from Joel's point of view. He already lost one daughter once, and that's basically how he sees Ellie, his daughter. He lost his real daughter, Sarah, in a very terrible, terrible way that I don't think anybody else in the game had went through. Like, they didn't lose their family member in a way that he did, because they straight up killed his daughter, and it was the American government. It's not like she was killed off by an infected person. So if you could imagine being placed in the very exact same situation again with Ellie, he probably just couldn't take that. And I couldn't understand that. He even says so in his song, uh, the first song that he sings to Ellie on the guitar. If I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself. So who knows what kind of a person Joel would have. He probably would have even been a worse person after losing Ellie. Because if you guys remember, he hung out with a bad crowd. He was a hunter himself at one point in his life. You know, killing people just to steal their food and supplies. Or he probably would have just committed suicide after losing Ellie. So, in my eyes, I think Ellie is the one person that keeps Joel grounded. She keeps him sane, and basically, it's Ellie is the last bit of humanity that Joel has left. That's what Ellie represents to Joel. Another thing I wanted to talk about was that people seem to forget when they bring up the fact that Joel stole whatever chance that this planet had of finding a cure for the disease. They seem to forget that there was a very big chance that the operation could fail. It wasn't a 100% guarantee that there was going to be a cure going through with the operation. All right, so let's move on from that, from Joel's death. Uh, Another thing that didn't I didn't really like about the game was that all of the new characters I was just not interested in at all. I couldn't find anything to relate to these new characters. Like, I just didn't find them interesting. Even from Ellie's group, like Dina and what was the other guy's name? Jesse. You know, when Jesse died, I didn't really feel anything. There was no connection. And that goes for Abby especially. I really didn't care for her at all. So the fact that I had to play for her for half of the game, that just dragged down my expectations for the game even more. The whole time I was just saying, when do I get to go back to Ellie? When do I get to go back to Ellie? And what was up with that scene with her and Owen in the boat? They're literally at each other's throats, arguing about, what they did. Owen goes so far as to say that, you know, Abby's a bad person because of what she did to Joel, and they grab each other aggressively, and then they begin to have sex. I didn't get that that scene at all. What was up with that? Like, how can you go from that to that in an instant? That was one of the points of the story where I was pulled out of. Another thing that bothered me is that they spent a lot of time trying to humanize Abby as you're playing her when she's interacting with people on in her base where she lives, and playing with dogs and all this other stuff. I just didn't buy into it. The image of her beating Joel to death um, somehow became engraved into my mind, what what would happen with Ellie herself. It it literally became engraved into her brain, the image of Joel being beat to death. And Ellie was literally begging her to spare Joel. And Abby just dealt the final blow and killed him. And you see the blood just squirt out from his head. And how do you humanize somebody like that? If it was me and I was beating somebody to death like that, it doesn't matter what for, like for vengeance or whatever, somebody begging me to stop and spare somebody's life, that would really tug at my heartstrings. And I would find compassion in order to spare them. Not for the person that I'm beating, but for the person that's begging me. I just couldn't understand how to relate or humanize somebody that would proceed to kill another human being after hearing the pleas and the sobbing of somebody else begging you to stop. And again, it almost came to the same situation with Dina. When Abby was about to kill Dina, basically, Ellie again was begging her not to kill her. And she tells her that she's pregnant. Have mercy, you know? But what does Abby say? She says, good. And she comes within an inch of slicing her throat until Lev basically tells her to stop. He didn't tell her, but she just gives her that look, you know? Like, don't do it, please. And yeah, you could argue that Ellie, you know, she killed a pregnant woman too. But you have to take into account that Ellie didn't know she was pregnant until after she killed her. So it was basically literally torturing me for those 10 plus hours that I had to play as Abby. And I know that I might get some hate for saying all this, but it's just the way how I felt when I was playing the game. I know that Abby has a small group of gamers that like her. Another thing that bothered me was that the ending, we see Ellie start to live on a farm happily with Dina and Dina's newborn child. At least everything seems to be happy. But on the inside, Ellie is still traumatized and suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Like I said before, the events of Joel's death is basically permanently engraved into her head, and she's being haunted by it every day. So I understand why she willingly chose to go after Abby again. Another thing about Abby, which is one of the reasons why I found it very hard to relate to her, was that people seem to forget that the last time that Ellie and Joel spoke had to do with the incident at the Fireflies hospital when Joel pulls Ellie out of the operating table and takes her away. Ellie basically tells Joel that she should have died in that operating table. Her life would have mattered. They would have found the cure. And Joel basically tells her that if the Lord were to give him a second chance, he said that he would do it all over again in exactly the same way. And Ellie responds by telling him that she knows, but she doesn't know if she's ever going to be able to forgive him for that. But, and this is the key point here, she's willing to try. And he says, I would like that. And that's it. That's the last time they spoke to each other. So when Abby comes along, tortures and kills Joel, she basically pulled the rug right out from under Ellie by doing that. She screwed whatever chance that Ellie had at making amends with her father. So I completely understand why Ellie would be raging about the loss of Joel and go after Abby, not once, but twice. And I know there's people out there saying that she really didn't have to and they could have worked things out. I really don't think that they could have. Uh, Something was going to give eventually if she chose not to go after Abby again. I just think that the stress and emotions would have just came to a head, and Dina and Ellie, things just wouldn't have worked out. I don't think, because they got a baby, and Ellie was literally scaring the baby with her terrors, and that's really not something easy to live with. And I know that there's people out there saying that they could have worked through it given time. It might have taken a long time, but eventually. But I just don't think so, because that's not something easy. So I understand her decision to do what she did, to continue to pursue Abby. But the thing that frustrates me is that she went through all that effort, because who knows where they were when they were living on that farm. I'm assuming that it was close to Jackson. So for her to go from near wherever Jackson is all the way to Santa Barbara, California, break into that base where everybody's a psycho, and then she gets stabbed in the side of her abdomen by a tree branch. She loses two of her fingers in the fight with Abby, and then she decides to let Abby live and escape. I really struggled with that one. I agree with most people when they say that it should have been a choice to the player. We should have had two different outcomes. One with you actually killing Ellie, or not Ellie, but Abby. And then the one that we got, the one that's actually in the game. To me, there wasn't closure in the actual ending that we got. And yeah, you could say that it's leading up to part 3, but at this point, I've lost almost all interest. Also, I do agree with a lot of people when they say that Abby ended up with more than Ellie, because Abby still has Lev, but Ellie has no one. She literally lost everyone she cared about. She's at odds with Tommy because she didn't follow through with killing Abby, and she lost Dina because she went after Abby against her wishes. So everything she had is lost to her now, and she's hanging on barely by a very thin thread. And also, now that she lost her fingers, she lost the ability to play the guitar. So yeah, I do agree with people when they say that Abby ended up coming out on top, because she still has Lev, she still has the hope of finding the Fireflies. So yeah, kind of sad. Um, but yeah, those are my overall thoughts and opinions on the game. Like I said before, I'm being generous and giving it a 7 out of 10. It is definitely not a 10 out of 10. It's far from that. But yeah, there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If not, you can give it a thumbs down. I know everybody has divided opinions on this game. So, thank you for watching, and I will catch you later on the tube. Alright, bye guys.